So, capitalization rates. This is just a bit of a refresher from last week. Um, there are different capitalization rates depending on what you look at. And you can see here that I looked at CBRE and Cushman and Wakefield, and you can see there are differences. And the differences between the two are not tremendous, but if you're talking a million or two, it does make a big difference in the values. Um, the reason why they are different is some may use, let's just say CBRE might use something like phoning people, phoning different businesses, phoning different buildings in Class A industrial, I'm talking about in the Class A industrial. And some will give values and some will give income statements and some will be based on sales. And Cushman and Wakefield might be doing exactly the same thing. And Cushman's Class A industrial may not have as many parameters as CBRE, as an example. So Cushman might say, well, we don't care if the roof is 20 years old. And CBRE might say, our roofs are all 10 years old, which would be um, a lower cap rate. And the lower cap rate is there because if you only have a roof that's a few years old as a roof that's opposed to 20 years old, your value of your business is, or your building in this case is going to be higher. And so because your business value is higher, your cap rate is lower. Remember that it's inversely proportional. The value of the business is inversely proportional to the cap rate. Okay. And by the way, if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate. I know last week we were in class and I had so many people in class I couldn't deal with the people who are online, but now everybody's online. If you have questions, you can save it till the end without any problem at all. I'll deal with it. Or raise your hand and I'd be happy to answer questions as we move along. So once again, just let me change this a bit. Just get that. So once again, we went through this to give you the example of capitalization rates on how they are inversely proportional to the value of the business. And so if you have a cap rate on the far left-hand side, you have a cap rate of 5% and your NOI is 100,000, your value of your business is 2 million. Whereas if you have a same NOI, but the cap rate is 14%, look what happens to the value of your business. And why is that? That is because cap rates are a measure of risk. And please do not forget that a business that's promising you 14% is a riskier business than the business that is giving you a 5% return. Pretty straightforward stuff there. Okay, so once again, when people are saying to you, geez, I want something with a cap rate of 15% or 14% or whatever, you have to look them in the eye and say, I'm sure I can find you something like that, but that's a risky business. If you want something that's a non-risky business, we're looking at cap rates at 5.5, even 4.5 for a Class A plaza with no vacancy, with high value tenants like banks and McDonald's and things like that. So do keep the capitalization rates in mind that they are inversely proportional to value. So what does it mean? A cap rate means a lower purchase price. A high cap rate means a lower purchase price for the buyer. For the seller, a low cap rate translates into a higher sale value. For the buyer, a low cap rate means less risk. For the seller, a high cap rate relates to a more difficult sale, quite simply because it is riskier. So let's take a look at the math of a capitalization rate. It can definitely represent the percentage return an investor may receive on an all cash purchase. This is really important, and we're going to get into return on investment in just a moment. So remember, the cap rate is the return on an all cash purchase. $1 million NOI at a $17 million value is a 5.9% cap rate if you pay cash. Therefore, at this rate of 5.9, the investor could, or maybe get a 5.9% rate, return on their investment. It's maybe still, right? What's the risk involved? Okay. And so you really always have to remember what the risk involved is. And the risk involved is dependent on who the buyer is. I mean, some buyers live a risk reward system, some have an aversion to risk, but basically, it's what you should get on an all cash purchase, always remembering the risk involved. Okay, once again, if it's a 14% return, the investor could or maybe get 14%, but will they, should they? Now you're getting really risky here. Okay. So you really do want to make sure that you understand that the return is based on a capitalization rate return is based on an all cash purchase while always remembering the risks involved. And as we talked about last week, what's the opportunity cost involved? I mean, you can get a pretty nice GIC today for 4.5. If you had a few $1 million, you probably get it for 5% without much problem. And some people are going to go for that. So 5.9 today isn't an unreasonable return compared to a GIC. But what is the opportunity cost? What could somebody do instead with their money instead of 5.9? And they could get a GIC for example, 5%. Is that 0.9 of a percent worth it to the buyer that you're increasing your risk from a non-risky, well, virtually non-risky GIC? Let me check the chat here. One moment. Yeah. Okay. There's nothing else there. So what happens if the investor is not a cash buyer? How to calculate your actual return. And if Beta is here, this is what we talked about last week that we would cover this week. It's called your ROI, your return on investment. And we're going to give you a few examples here. A return on investment can tell an investor the actual percentage return for any specified segment of time. And usually, what the investor wants to look for is a 1 year return, is what they're usually looking for. It'll allow the investor to manipulate the NOI of a company and add expenses, for example, a mortgage payment. And if you recall last week, we can take away the interest expense because it's not going to apply to the new buyer. Take away the interest expense from an income statement because it's not going to apply to a new buyer. But now we're talking about a buyer. What are they going to have for a mortgage payment or an interest payment on their mortgage? And the ROI will tell an investor the average profit displayed as a percentage over a specified period of time, regardless of how much profit or loss in each year is incurred. Just let me check the chats again here. Hi, Beta. Yeah, so David, send me an email and we'll go through that when we are done. But if you have the NOI, uh, well, let me answer David's question here. David is asking, could you please help me evaluate a price for a business that has a 1.2 million gross income and NOI is 400,000? Well, we don't really care what the gross income is, David. We care that the NOI is $400,000. But now you need a cap rate, David. And so I don't know what the business is. I don't know what you're doing here. You need a cap rate. And so you can Google what the cap rate is for whatever business or building or whatever you're doing, and we can work at it from there. But without a cap rate, we're kind of dead in the water. So here's an example of an ROI. There's $1 million investment and a $75,000 NOI. Pretty straightforward. The cap rate is 7.5% for a cash buyer with no other anticipated extra expenses going forward. Pretty straightforward. We've been through this in session one. We just had the recap now. But now we're going to change things up. We're going to assume a yearly payment of $35,000. That's actually should say interest payment because that's what you can reduce. But either way, mortgage are at 35 and a 5-year term. What is the actual percentage rate of return is the ROI. The answer is 4%. We had a $75,000 NOI, right? Now there's a mortgage payment, yearly payment of $35,000. So now your real NOI for your buyer is $40,000. That's 4%. This is known as return on investment. Basically, if you want to look at it, it's a new cap rate, but it's not the cap rate because the risk is still 7.5%. Okay, so you always have to go back to risk when you're talking about cap rates. Okay, so now you have $40,000. The answer is 4%. So the return isn't 7.5% now, the return is 4% now because of the mortgage payments, interest expense, whichever way you want to look at it. Okay. I don't have it exact here. I made these numbers up. I'm just trying to show you. I'm not saying that there's a, I don't know how much the mortgage payment is. That's 35,000. I'm simply trying to show you a simple example of an ROI. And we're going to get into a more complicated example, I think, on the next slide. But you have to, this is what buyers are doing is they're going, oh yeah, great. I've got an NOI. I've got a 75,000 dollar NOI. I have a 7.5% return. But what's my real return going to be? And now they're going to start to take away some extra expenses that they may have, and they're going to start to reduce the seller's NOI so they can figure out what the return on investment is.
John, sorry, can I ask a quick question?
For sure.
We know the higher NO, cap rate is more riskier uh, um, business, right? But
Yes.
more ROI, right? So it can we say if the ROI is high, you have to make sure that cap rate is cover that, right? So return on investment is higher, but the more riskier business, right?
So, so ROI is only a single answer to one specific buyer. Okay.
Okay.
Simple as that. You can't take ROI and spread it out over, you know, thousands of buyers. It just doesn't work the same way. It's for one buyer only, and it is dependent upon the buyer's risk aversion. Are they
Okay.
happy with 4%? Sure, because you know why they're happy with 4%. And what we haven't calculated here is, well, now I'm paying off a mortgage. Let's say it's a Class A industrial building. Now I'm paying off a mortgage as well. I have to calculate the equity that I am gaining in the building back into my calculations. So there is no blanket ROI is better than the other. Okay.
Okay.
Every buyer is different. Okay.
Correct. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Dulal, you have your hand up.
Yes, what depend, you said is NOI is if a high profit, that one is high risk. Is it all sector is same? I don't think so, right? Certain sector, this high profit is
No,
medium risks also have.
no. So it's risk. Doesn't matter what sector. I mean, if you want a 17% return on your investment, I can sell you a motel on Highway 69 south of Sudbury. It doesn't matter if it's a shoe store. Well, it's hard to get a cap rate for a shoe store, but it doesn't matter if it's an apartment building, if it's a Class A industrial, if it's a Tim Hortons franchise. It's the risk involved.
Okay,
There are
but
there
on
there are
my
there are
my
there are no exceptions to allow.
Yeah, I understand that, but on my real life experience, I see few business, not all, and few business, Danforth and Victoria Park there is a high profit, I can say it's not medium risk, it's low risk, high profit.
Oh, there's always it's a good point, Dulal. There's always going to be businesses that do well, even though the cap rate was high, 10, 15%. For sure, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. But in general, cap rates are flat out a measure of risk. The higher the cap rate, the riskier the business. Simple as that. But will there always be exceptions? Of course. Who thought Tesla would do so well? Car manufacturing business. Oh my goodness, you want a risky business to start? And look what happened. I mean, a zillionaire, right? And so, there's a good example for you where probably way back when the cap rate was ridiculous to start a car business, but in the end, it all worked out well. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a good point. So let's dig into this a little bit more about the ROI. The purchase price was $1 million. The year one NOI is $75,000. And as I said in the previous slide, your mortgage is $35,000. But now the buyer knows that they need a new truck, and he's also going to update and paint offices. So in year one, your total expenses is 85,000, your NOI is 75,000. You have a loss in year one of 10,000. That doesn't sound very good. In year two, you're in your second year of business, your NOI increased because you're working hard, you're making more money, your NOI is increased to 85,000. Your mortgage payment stays the same. You're purchasing a second truck now because you're getting busier. Your year two profit is now $10,000. And in year three, your NOI is increasing because you're at 95,000 and you're busy. You're in third year of your business. Your mortgage stays the same at 35,000, but I'm getting too busy. Now I need another person to hire $20,000. Your year three profit is $40,000. Your total 3-year profit is $40,000. What is the ROI? It's 1.33% per year, right? 40,000 is 4% of the purchase price of $1 million. And so your ROI is 1.33. And this is what commercial buyers, investors do, is they look at this. Now, back to Farsheed's point, but I now have this building and I now have these trucks and I'm getting the equity paid on them and I'm building up my business and I'm getting equity and that's another calculation altogether. But I wanted to show you this ROI example. And this is what people do, that they look at the first year, and this is what we generally get is 1 year of an NOI from a seller or the listing agent. And you go, well, that's a great return. And the buyer goes, yeah, you know what? I'm really not so sure about that great return because I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to fix the offices. I have to paint the office. I need a new truck. The truck that's coming with this business is really terrible. It didn't include any inventory. In year one, I have to buy $40,000 worth of chickens because I'm opening a chicken restaurant. I mean, I don't know. But this is what buyers do to figure out what their ROI is really on the money. And to be honest with you, I don't think too many people are going to do 1.33 per year. That's a pretty lousy return. I don't think anybody would disagree with me unless, once again, they are gaining so much equity in the business that they feel that they can sell it more. This would work perhaps for, a good medical office, a building with, 20 or 30 medical offices in it that you can raise the rent and make more money and all that kind of stuff. What's my return at the end of the day? There are professionals that all they do is figure out ROIs for businesses. Okay, does anybody have any questions about this?
Excuse me.
Sarah, please go ahead.
Let me turn on my camera. This 1.33%, it's 40,000 divided by 1 million and then divided by 3.
40,000 divided by 3 years. How much are you getting each year?
Okay.
Okay.
because that 40,000 is only for the year 3 or it just for 3 years. I didn't get this one.
Right. So you'll see here that year one has a loss of 10,000.
Yeah,
Year two has a profit of 10,000. So they
10,000. Yeah.
so they cancel each other out, right? And
Yeah.
so your total year three profit is all coming
Yeah.
at the end of year three, and it's 40,000 bucks.
Okay, and at the end of year 3, we have 40,000 in our hand, yeah?
Right. In this example, yes,
Okay, and we should divide it by 3 years.
that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And Dulal, yes.
Actually, this I just want to know if you have idea, just let me know. On your experience so far, this about Timothy, how many percent will be returned? If you know is, I just want to know this one.
I looked it up a couple of years ago. You can look up franchises for franchise cap rates. And I don't know if it specifically said Tim Hortons. It probably includes Wendy's and McDonald's and maybe Starbucks and all of those. But a couple of years ago, it was, and I'm taking a bit of a guess here, but it was about 5%. It's really good, right? Because, if you open a Tim Hortons, you're probably going to do really well. The risk is really low that you're not going to do well. But as a result, the cost of opening a franchise is really high. It's really expensive.
Thank you,
Okay.
thank you,
But you
thank you.
can you can Google it. You can Google what is the cap rate for Tim Hortons, or what is the average cap rate for a good franchise. You'll get answers for that for sure, Dulal. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Okay. So,
Hello, Don. I have a
oh,
question.
yes, Mary.
Yeah, before you pass, please. The 1.33, that 40,000 for the year 3, how you got that number? Which number you divided? I know that the year 3, 40,000, are you dividing it by $1 million, or how you got the 1.33? I want to just learn it for always.
So because over the 3 years,
Yeah,
your total profit over 3 years is $40,000,
yes,
right?
yes.
So what is that? 40,000 is 4% of 1 million,
Uh-huh.
right? So it's 3 years, 4 divided by 3 is 1.33.
Uh-huh. I got it now. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah,
Thank
no problem. Actually, I just go back here. Like I said, it's not a great return on your investment, this particular example. Right? You're not making $1 million a year here by any stretch. You're making 1.33% per year. It's not very much, but I made it like this so that you can see the dramatics of it. That it's people will add all sorts of things into year one, especially if they're moving offices, they're going to add in moving truck expenses, all that kind of stuff. So you really have to think about what a buyer is when the buyer says, it's just not working out for me. This is the kind of process that the buyer has gone through to figure out that it's not quite working out for them. Okay. So
Question,
net
can I say
profit.
something? Hi. Hi, can I say
Yes,
something?
Paula.
Hi,
Yeah.
hi. If for the first 2 year, obviously it was just investment, but after the third year, it seems that the business start to work. So if you say return on investment is this is it, and it's not a little bit of misleading because for year 3. This is already started to grow. You know what I
Paula,
mean?
most small businesses, and we're talking with you guys, a lot of this is small businesses. Most small businesses lose money in year one. Simple as that. Most small businesses break even after year 2, and most small businesses make money after year 3, just like this example.
I understand. My point is in general, if we say this is it, this business is not worth it, while we started out to make profit on year 3. You know
Well,
what I mean?
I just made this up, Paula.
I I know, in general. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe I don't understand, Paula. I'm sorry, but I just
No
made
problem.
this up,
Thank you.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's not a real example of what would be happening in the real
I
world.
know, I'm
Okay.
talking about the real world because you're referring to ROI refers to a specific segment of time.
Right.
Yeah, so this is for the whole period from the time that the businesses start till now.
For
Uh,
3 years. Yeah.
yeah. So it's not just a specific segment. It's this whole period that business was existing. That's why I'm talking. I that was my
Okay.
interpretation.
Can I say something in between, please?
Sure, Mary, go ahead.
Paula, actually, imagine that you spend $1 million cash for a business, and then after 3 years, you just got 40,000. Imagine that even you didn't make even 10,000 per year. Means that this business is not good.
That's right, Mary. It's not a good business. This one is not a good business, but it's a great example because it's got you guys thinking about it.
Yeah.
And so that's good
Oh,
news,
that's a good
right?
idea. That's a good idea that you brought it to this point, because after 3 years, 40,000 for 1 million, 40,000 for 100,000, maybe makes sense. But 40,000 for $1 million, it doesn't make any sense.
Right. It's not a great return, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Thanks.
that's why it's 1.33. My whole idea of this slide
Yeah.
is to make sure that you guys understand when a buyer comes back to you and say, even though it's got a good cap rate, it's 6-7%, which is kind of nice. It's got a nice building or business involved in it, whatever you're doing. And the buyer comes back and says, it just isn't working for me. This is the kind of calculation that the buyer will be doing, or the buyer's accountant will be doing, or the buyer's lender will be doing to work this out. Okay, that's why this kind of thing happens, that buyers come back and say, no, other buyers come back and say, this is a great opportunity, I'll take it, because the ROI at the end is a lot higher than 1.33. And so I just wanted to point out what buyers go through,
Yeah.
why a lot of agents that are doing this, they come to me and they say, I just don't understand why the buyer didn't go through with this. Well, this is the kind of process that the buyer has gone through. Okay.
Hi, John.
Mazzy, how are you?
Thank you so much. So uh, I have a question about the mortgage. First of all, this is just business, buying business, or the property also?
Doesn't matter either.
Okay. What if the buyer buys some place and for to start another business? So can we consider the previous business calculation into account?
Um, no, that doesn't make sense to me, Mazzy. They're buying another business. Why would they be basing this on a business
Like
that they own
Like
already?
imagine that you're buying some place, first of all, what the buyer can change the class, like you buy some place which was used to be some kind of charity and start some different business in future.
Well, they'd have to, I guess, I think what you're asking me, I guess the buyer's going to buy whatever they're buying, and then they're going to go through the cost analysis of how much it's going to cost them to start another business in that location and
So they
work
can
out
rely
what,
on the information like statements of the previous business.
well, no, not if it's a new business. No.
Uh,
No, you're not gonna take the statements from a bookstore and open a shoe store and depend
Uh-huh.
on and depend on the income statement from the bookstore. Definitely not.
Mhm. So this is the case just if you want to continue the same business.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But let's say it's a new business. In this case, yes, it's basically an existing business. But what would happen if it's a new business? Let's just change some of the words around for a second. It's a good question, Mazzy. What happens if it's a new business? Well, now they're buying a building for $1 million and they're going to run a business out of it, just as an example. Okay. They've got an idea to run a business. Who knows what the business is? It really doesn't matter. Okay. They're going to have an estimate of the NOI at the end of the year. And let's just say that estimate is going to be 100, and I just got to add this up quickly, 30, 40, 75, 85,000, right? So let's say their estimate of their first year NOI is going to be $160,000 that they're going to make in year one, NOI. That's their estimate. But then they're going to have expenses of 35,000. They're going to need to purchase a new truck of 40,000. They're going to update the offices for 10,000. It makes their NOI $75,000. So they're going to do the same kind of idea, Mazzy, just work it out backwards from what I'm showing you here, because here we have a true life. Well, it's not, it's an example, but it's a true life example. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes, Farnes, please.
Hi, John. Yeah, I have a question. So I was wondering, when does the mortgage get involved after like they calculated ROA with their accountant? Like, we are not sure that it'll be given, the mortgage will be given to us, right?
Oh, well, right. And so this would be, you're talking, it's, at this point, I think Farnes to answer that is at this point, the buyer's talking to their lawyer, they're talking to their accountant, they're talking to their banker, and putting this all together. Whether one comes exactly before the other in terms of the calculations, it's going to come eventually.
Right. It's
But
kind of complicated for me, I don't know, like when they calculate the ROA, once they're not sure how much mortgage would they get.
they will know they will have an estimate
Right.
that'll get them close enough. They've talked to a bank and they've said to the bank, I'm going to start this business. It's called XYZ business. And to be able to start this business, I need to borrow, I don't know, $200,000. And the bank's going to say, well, if that all works out, your mortgage is going to be $35,000 a year, as an example, Farnes.
So it
Okay.
doesn't matter how much will be the income and cap
Oh no,
rate. Uh-huh.
remember from last week. What do banks want? Banks want the net operating income for the last few years. Last 2 years, almost always 3 years more likely. And
Right.
from there, they're going to see if the NOI is producing enough money to pay a mortgage.
Right. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Jeff.
Uh,
Hello, Jeff.
John, thank you for taking my call, my message and my question. John, do we as a realtor need to know all this information?
No, yes, and no. As I've said a few times now, you guys need to know sometimes why a buyer is saying no to a good deal. Okay. Buyers are looking at a cap rate and then they're working out the ROI. Okay. That's what's going on here. Okay. So you have to have some idea. And often I find that with lots of agents, a buyer will say, no, it's not. It doesn't make sense to me. And a lot of agents won't ask why not. And this is the why not. Okay. And the agents don't ask the why it won't work for you because they maybe won't understand the why not. and the buyer says, well, the mortgage I have to get is really high, that kind of thing. I think I have to buy a new truck. I'm going to have to paint the offices. It just doesn't work out for me. And so in your head, Jeff, you can think to yourself, well, how can I overcome this objection? Well, Mr. Buyer, in terms of the mortgage, can I ask what interest rate are you getting? And maybe you have a good connection to a commercial mortgage agent that will be able to give you a lower rate. I don't know. But you should always ask why not. And a lot of agents don't ask why not because they don't understand how it works. And this is how it works.
All right. Now, the reason I asked the question, John, there are times when you're working with a newbies, they have no clue what they are doing. They want to get into a business and it's their first time getting into a business. And they expect you to know most of all these things so that you can properly guide them to purchase a profitable business.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, can you work this out yourself? Yeah, you can probably work this out yourself. Don't forget on the income statement that you're looking at, the NOI, you're looking at a mortgage and you've taken that mortgage amount out, but maybe you should say to the buyer, is this about what you're going to pay too for a mortgage? And help them along with the decision-making process. Sure. But at the end of the day, Jeff, what do? We refer them to the professional. You should double check everything that we've just talked about with your accountant. Just the same way as when you're selling a residential house, you should perhaps consider getting a home inspection, you know, and make sure that you always, at the end of the day, refer this to a professional. But do you need to have some idea what's going on so that you can talk intelligently to a buyer? And this is what's happening in the background in the buyer's mind. Good
Thank you,
questions.
John.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, was that somebody else had something to say?
No, I just say thank you, John.
Oh, no problem, Jeff, anytime. This just repeats. This slide is confusing. I'm not going to go into this slide. So that is cap rates and return on investment. All right. Now, I think we do get back into return on investment, but that's enough for one day or 2 days before I give you all headaches talking about return on investments and cap rates. I thought we would then switch this up and we're going to go into commercial leases now. Okay. We do go back into return on investment, but we're going to take a little bit of a break from that now, let it all sink into you guys. And by the way, in 2 weeks from now, when we have our next session, and as a reminder, next week, Wednesday, we do not have a session. In 2 weeks from now, at the office, I have the printouts for week 2. And when you guys show up for week 3, I'm happy to give both week 2 and week 3 printouts to anybody that wants it. So commercial leases. So just let me check the chats here. 1 second. Yeah, medical office. I'd need to know the cap rate. Yeah, can we hand out for sure for this session? Absolutely. Yes, I can email it to you. If anybody wants the emails, they can't wait. Or sorry, if anybody wants this handout and they can't wait till for 2 weeks, just email me and I'm happy to send it out for you. And David, I can't help you yet. I need to know the cap rate for what you're doing when you say medical. Is it a building? Is it a business? Like, what's going on? So, commercial leases. Types of leases. There are a variety of different types of leases out there. And boy, talking about out there, I just looked outside my window and it's a blizzard out there. Types of leases. Gross leases. Gross leases are the most common standard for office space and require the buyer to pay a flat monthly amount. The landlord is responsible for all expenses of operating the building, including taxes, insurance, and repairs or maintenance, TMI. Taxes, maintenance, and insurance. Now, gross leases sometimes include utilities, and sometimes they do not include utilities. We'll talk about what happens on MLS in just a second. Net leases. A net lease requires you to pay for some are all of the real estate taxes of the property in addition to the base rent. The building operating costs and insurance are responsibility of the landlord. So one, the net lease, it means that one of TMI is payable. With a net lease, you're responsible for two, okay? The taxes and the insurance. These are the standards, okay? Is there flexibility? Yes. What about a net, a triple net lease? Triple net lease pass on all the cost of operating the building, including taxes, maintenance, and insurance. And so that's your TMI is a net. A percentage lease. A percentage lease, you guys are probably not going to run into very, very often. It's very rare in the real estate world, but just in case, the buyer pays a fixed rate plus a percentage of gross income. Okay. Percentage leases are a special type of rental arrangements for retailers in multi-tenant locations such as malls or shopping centers. So in a mall, I have a great example of this. Yorkdale, and maybe some of you have read this. I'll get to you in a second there, Sad. The Yorkdale just went through a very high legal battle because Hudson's Bay had left Yorkdale and Fairweather wanted to move into Yorkdale, and Yorkdale said no to Fairweather, and Fairweather took Yorkdale to court. Yorkdale said that Fairweather was too low of a retailer in terms of its quality, and they felt it would undermine the business model that Yorkdale has of high retailers, high fashion retailers when it comes to Fairweather. But also what's happening in the background. Yorkdale is one of those places that has you pay a base rent and a gross amount of your sales to Yorkdale. And so guess what Yorkdale wants? Debbie, can you mute everybody, please, Debbie? And everybody please mute. And so Fairweather was turned down because their gross income probably is not enough.
John, you have muted as well.
Yeah, by mistake.
There we go. Okay. So just let me go to this, Sad, before I get to you. So this is so important. Most members of TREB have no idea what kind of lease they are talking about. Now, MLS listings, you do get the CRBEs, you do get the Avison and Youngs, that kind of thing. Cushman and Wakefield, you do get those agents that are listing properties. And what they have, either gross or net, is probably correct. But you should always inquire with a listing brokerage what is and is not included in the rent. And the reason why is TREB only allows a listing agent to choose net or gross when completing the MLS data form. And that's a real problem because you don't know if it's net, you don't know if it's net, you don't know if it's net, and you don't know if it's gross. So if you are showing commercial properties for a prospective tenant, you should be in contact with the listing agent and double check what's included and not included. Just the other day, I forget which agent I was talking to now. Anyways, they had it advertised as a gross lease on MLS, and gross means that TMI is included. Well, guess what? TMI was not included. And we straightened out the agent, and the agent then changed his listing to say net, so that you had some idea that not everything is included in there. So be really careful because TREB only allows net or gross leases when completing the MLS data form. So, Said, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Morning, afternoon, John. Thank you for the opportunity. One quick question that I wanted to ask is for the net. I have come across where landlords are trying to push capital repair, cost of replacement of HVAC units and things like that onto the tenants.
Absolutely.
Now, is
happens
that
all the time.
acceptable? So that's an acceptable practice? Okay.
Well, is the difference between acceptable and nice are two different things. But
Yeah. Well,
do we see it all the time? I see it all the time, particularly
right.
in that kind of a mid-range plaza that's getting older. Where perhaps the HVAC plant is getting older and will need to be replaced. Do we see that? Yes. Do I see it sometimes because the roof of the building is getting old and the landlord doesn't want to pay for the whole roof of the building? They're going to
Mhm.
download it relative to your square footage. Absolutely. Is it a practice that we like? No. Is it an acceptable practice? Absolutely yes.
Okay, so here's one question. Can the TMI then be challenged when it comes to the maintenance part? Let's say that if I, as a tenant, end up going and hiring Black& and McDonald or BGIS or somebody and say, I need you to come and maintain my property. I need you to do the snow removal. I need you to do the landscaping. I need you to check my HVAC, plumbing, and everything. So why do I need to pay maintenance to the landlord now? How can I have that conversation with the landlord and say, look, I understand there are taxes involved. I understand you have insurance, but you put all your capital repairs and everything on me. Why would I pay you a TMI for that? I would like to take care of my own maintenances. I can provide you a monthly report saying that, hey, this is how the maintenance is going and this is what the compliance items are when it comes to fire extinguishers, life safety systems, elevators, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
you can try anything you want, Sad. There's nothing stopping you from
Okay.
trying anything like that. And I have seen it where
Okay.
the tenant has negotiated with the landlord and has said exactly what you are suggesting, that I will provide the maintenance for my
Right.
own air conditioner. But if my own air conditioner breaks down, you're responsible for it. And here's all my maintenance that it is being properly maintained. Absolutely, you can negotiate that for sure.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I just wanted to get that clarity. So thank you
Yeah.
for that.
No. Hey, you know what? In a commercial lease now, if it's coming to just to expand, and I'll get to you in a second there, Dulal. In a commercial lease, if you're in Yorkdale, there's no negotiating. It's
Yeah.
simple. What is it?
Yeah.
Cadillac Fairview, I think, is the one that owns Yorkdale.
Yep.
I don't believe you're going to get away with 1 percentage point lower than what they want you to sign. But with smaller family-owned plazas, there's usually some flexibility that you can get into smaller buildings, that kind of thing, that are not corporately owned, call it. Corporately owned usually has corporate lawyers that are pretty strict. Anything smaller than that, there's usually room for negotiation side, okay?
Okay, and that also goes for insurance. And the reason I say that for insurance is that so the company that I'm, partnering with, they have sensors they do. So let's say you have a hot water tank or you have a sewage pit or whatever, we install sensors in there. And when it gets to a certain level, the sensor will send a trigger alarm, which means that I have a pump out that needs to be done of that space proactively so that it never becomes an issue for an insurance company. So similar to you putting your winter tires on your car and getting 10% off and then installing a tracker and getting 30% off, it's the same mindset that we would now go to the insurance companies and say, hey, for this particular client, they shouldn't be paying 30% extra premium because they have all these sensors installed, which
Sure.
are protecting the site.
Sure. I
So
guess to answer that question, I think the only thing I can say there is that I'm sure everything can be negotiated, Sad, but I have never seen insurance being negotiated. Never.
there's always a
So
first gun. I'll work on it. I'll let you
there's always the first
know.
time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's always the first time. Okay. Dulal,
Awesome.
please go
Thank
ahead.
you.
Okay.
Just short question. Just now you tell me, just now you said that there's a TMI about the MLS mistake. What happened, since you was confused the MLS mistake, but if you send the offer, you don't want to clarify with listing agent. You just send the offer, then offer accepted. On this situation, what going to happen?
Well, so usually what happens in a commercial lease offer is that you still have landlords and tenants, lawyers, reviews. Okay. And eventually somewhere, or I'm going to throw in a third one, or the landlord has their own lease that has to be accepted. Okay. And somewhere in there, someone's going to catch it. Okay. Someone's going to catch it now. let's just say the listing agent who's done all this is a total idiot, and just goes to the landlord and say, sign this, accept this, it's wonderful. And the landlord goes, great, I'll sign it. And then the landlord finds out later that you've signed a gross lease when in fact it should be TMI in addition to. What's going to happen? I would say the landlord's not going to give you the key to the property. Okay?
No price negotiation or anything?
Well, now you're asking me a question that's going to be individual for every scenario, right? There's going to be a million scenarios here, Dalal. I can't answer that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The Commercial Tenancy Act. It's in favor of the landlord, you guys. It's as simple as that. As much as the Residential Tenancy Act is in favor of the tenant, the Commercial Tenancy Act is in favor of the landlord. Now, not all of the Residential Act is in favor of the tenant, some's in favor of the landlord, but I think both of you guys, all of you guys know what I mean. End of tenancy. In a commercial tenancy, the right to remain is not automatic. For example, if the term is 3 years, there's no reversion to month like there is in residential. The tenancy ends unless both parties agree to new terms. Rent increases. There is no provision in the Act to control rent increases in the commercial tenancy world. What payment is in the lease agreement is what stays for the specified length of the term. If you have a 5-year term and it's the same rental rate for all 5 years and the landlord has agreed, the landlord cannot increase the rental amount in the 3rd year or the 2nd year or the 4th year or whatever. Okay, simple. All right. Failure to pay. If the tenant does not pay, the landlord can change locks on the 16th day rent is due. That's a little different from the Residential Tenancy Act, I can tell you that. Or if the tenant does not pay, the landlord may seize the tenant's property 1 day following default and 5 days following obtain appraisals and dispose. It's negated if the tenant pays within the 5 days. So basically, the landlord, after the proper amount of time, there has to be written notice and stuff like that. I've simplified it a little bit, but basically, the landlord can lock the doors and the tenant is beat. Now, if that happens, the landlord, I should say, locks the doors. Can the tenant have the right to go into the property and remove their either inventory or whatever? The answer is yes. Okay. You just can't keep everything that is in there. So I have, first of all, I think Farshid, I think you were first, Farshid Gorbani.
Yes, John, in terms of the tenancy, commercial tenancy, we have 5-year rent with the allowance for another 5 years. After the very first 5 year, what's gonna happen? The second 5 year, the tenant can stay or go, one option. And what's gonna happen there
Okay.
about the
So
rent?
here's how it works. For the second 5 years, there's always a portion at the end of the first 5 years that the tenant has to give notice to the landlord whether they will exercise their right to take the second 5-year term. It's somewhere between 3 and 6 months before the end of the first 5-year term that the tenant will say, I'm not exercising my right, I'm out, or I would like to exercise my right to have the second 5 years. When that happens, then there's two choices. The landlord and tenant can negotiate. Well, there's three choices actually. The tenant and the landlord have a chance to negotiate a rate for the second 5-year term. Okay. And if they can't, then they get an appraisal in there and they find out um, what the going rental rate is, and that's what the rental rate will be. The second choice, it automatically goes to arbitration. They each get an appraiser and you split the difference between the two. Okay. The third choice is that they try to negotiate, but in the original lease, it says that the tenant will not have to pay X amount of dollars or X percentage rate increase for the second year term. So they're paying $5,000 a month for the first 5 years. It could say that the tenant will renegotiate, but under no circumstances will the rent increase more than 5%, that kind of thing. Those are basically the three choices that you have, Farshid.
Okay,
It's all on paper before the tenant signs on the dotted line before they move in.
sure. What if the tenant wants to stay, but the landlord say, no, I want my property? Can do that? They can do that or
No,
not?
no. If there's a second year term, unless there's a demolition clause in the lease, if
Mhm.
there's a second year term, it is the tenant's right to stay. The
Okay,
landlord can't say sorry. And so if the landlord says, well, I want $1 million a month, that's when it goes to the appraisal process.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a good question. Anybody else so far?
Sorry, about can you explain more about number two if the tenant does not pay the landlord? Uh,
I'm
Failure to
sorry.
pay?
Are you talking about, failure? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
number
the land,
two.
yeah, oh, sorry, yeah, sure. No, the landlord has the right. Now, there has to be written documentation back and forth here. Okay. But can they seize the tenant's property? The answer is yes. And then can they sell the tenant's property? Yes, but they have to sell the tenant's goods with fair market value. So, there's a refrigerator, they can't sell it for $1. They've got to sell it for whatever that refrigerator is worth. Okay. And
Okay.
if they're selling all the stuff that the tenant owns, then the landlord is only allowed to keep what is owed to the landlord, and everything else above that goes back to the tenant.
This happens after 16 days if they
That's
don't pay.
correct. That, that
Okay.
that's correct. And there's forms and stuff that have to be filled out and sent and properly sent and all that. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
No, no interest. Landlords are not required to pay interest on prepaid rent or security deposits. The Residential Tenancy Act, of course, the landlord has to pay interest on the last month's rent. Security deposits. The landlord is permitted to take prepaid rent and or security deposits to any amount they want. Okay. So it's not just first and last like it is in residential. They can ask for years of rent in advance. They can ask for hundreds of thousands of dollars in security deposits. No limit on that kind of thing. Okay. So 24 hours notice. The landlord does not have the right to enter the premises or have a key to the premises unless specific terms exist in the lease agreement. Okay. So the landlord, you can imagine that you're a landlord and the tenant is a jewelry store. Well, the owner of the jewelry store is not going to give the landlord any keys to the unit. Simple as that. Now, after 16 days, can the landlord hire a locksmith and change the locks? The answer is yes. But the landlord does not automatically have a right to a key to the unit. And in residential, the landlord does have the right to have a key. So that's different. It's the opposite again. So I guess that's not quite all in favor of the landlord, but most of it is in favor of the landlord for sure. If you want to take a picture of this, here's your Commercial Tenancy Act information link if you want to have a look at it and read and try not to fall asleep while you're reading it. But it is, if you ever have deep questions about the Commercial Tenancy Act, this is the link that will get you there if you want to take a picture. I'll even wait for a second for those of you who have pens and paper that want to write it down instead. That's a link to the Commercial Tenancy Act. Just give that 1 second here. So let me check the chats here. It is Bahar has her hand up. Please, Bahar, go ahead.
Hi, Jen. Thank you. So my question is, if we have a demo clause in the like agreement, and let's say it says 10 years or 15 years, and for some reason uh, that demolition happens before than 15 years, is it happening in the reality or no?
So demolition clauses would be part of the original lease signed by the tenant and the landlord. A demolition clause isn't going to show up all of a sudden out of the blue. And so the demolition clause is there at the very beginning of the lease. The tenant understands what the demolition clause is saying. And most demolition clause say, most, there's two examples now, but most say that at the end of a term, the landlord has the right to not extend into the second or third terms because the plaza or whatever it is going to be demolished. Okay.
Okay.
That definitely exists in many, many leases. The other one that I've seen that really kind of stinks, to be honest with you, Bahar, is some leases say the landlord can give the tenant 6 months notice for demolition. Well, wait a second. Is that in year one? So the tenant buy or rents the place, puts his business in there, and 6 months later he gets notice that the plaza is going to be demolished. I've actually seen that, and it's lousy. And most of the ones I've seen that have that clause, the tenants don't rent it. But I've seen that clause in more than one lease that the landlord can just give notice at any time that they're going to demolish. Okay.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. The demolition clause. Wonderful clause, eh? That's a real bummer. So,
Hi, John.
yes, Jeff.
What would be an appropriate demolition clause duration?
Most demolition clauses are effective at the end of the term. So normally what would happen is that the landlord would have to give notice to the tenant. I see 6 months, I've seen 9 months, I've actually seen a year, which is pretty nice. But usually it's between 6 and 9 months that the landlord has the right that they will not extend the option for a second term because the building or wherever you are is going to be demolished. It's usually at the end of the term.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So common lease clauses. Okay. So common lease clauses. So there's a lot of clauses already in your transaction kits. Okay. And in your transaction kits for commercial leases, the Schedule A has the most common ones in there already. These are some other ones that are in there. Some of these are in there, some of them aren't in there. It's just if you want to take a picture of it so you have it. For those of you who have downloaded the OREA clauses booklet, it's all under lease/com. And I think there's 52 different lease/com clauses that you can choose from in the OREA handbook that you can get. And so these are just some of them, but they're very common ones. And like I say, most of the ones in Schedule A are the most common ones. Like I know the lawyer's approval is there, assignment for the lease is usually there, working chattels is usually there. Depending which offer you're using, signage and parking is usually there. Zoning, I think, is always there in Schedule A, that kind of a thing. So if somebody wants to take a picture of this, great. If not, you can go to the OREA clause booklets and go to lease/com, and you'll see all 52 of these common clauses and conditions. That's for office space. For sub leases, You're going to need a landlord's approval of the subtenant, and that's already pre-printed on Form 515. And the subtenant's approval of the existing lease, it's already in Section 10 of Form 515. And the reason I'm showing you this is we see this a lot, is for a sublease, which is Form 515, the AREA Form 515, it already has pre-printed in the documents, Section 11 and Section 10, these two clauses. So you don't need to have it in Schedule A. Okay. In addition to lease clauses, common clauses for the occupation of a commercial condo, of course, is status certificate and tenant abides by the condominium rules. Not much different from residential there. Okay. So you can use both of those. Remember, clauses are interchangeable between residential and commercial. There's nothing stopping you from using a residential clause in a commercial lease and vice versa, as far as that goes. So, as an example, I think it's on the next slide actually. Oh, no, sorry. So, as an example, you have a home inspection clause. Can you use that home inspection clause in a commercial transaction? The answer is yes, except I wouldn't use home, I would change it to property. And we're going to talk about how to manipulate clauses in the next session for sales and for leases.